The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Peter came and said to Jesus, "Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times?" Jesus said to him, "Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, his lord ordered him to be sold together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the lord of that slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him by the throat, he said, 'Pay what you owe.' Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you.' But he refused. Then he went and threw him into prison until he would pay the debt. Then his fellow slaves saw what had happened. They were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. Then his lord summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?' And in anger, his lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay his entire debt. So my heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
In the name of one God, Creator, Sustainer, and Redeemer. Ernest Hemingway wrote a short story called The Capital of the World, and it begins this way. Madrid is full of boys named Paco, which is a diminutive of the name Francisco. And there's a Madrid joke about the father who came to Madrid and inserted an advertisement in the personal columns of the newspaper El Liberal, which said, "Paco, meet me at Hotel Montaña, noon, Tuesday. All is forgiven. Papa." And how a squadron of the Civil Guard had to be called out to disperse the 800 young men who showed up. So what's funny is how many people in Madrid are named Paco. What's less funny is the universal need to be forgiven. If there are so many of us who long to be freed from our guilt, to be reconciled with a friend, to be returned into the bosom of our family, why then is it so hard to forgive? Peter asks Jesus how many times one needs to forgive the sins of another in their church. How much is enough forgiveness? Jesus' response is basically, if you're still counting, then it's not really forgiveness. And if it's not really forgiveness, as Jesus suggests in his story, then we are invalidating, we are cutting ourselves off from the generous, redeeming, transforming forgiveness and love given to us by God over and over again. Now, I've heard some of you say to me, I just can't do it. I cannot forgive. They hurt me too badly. And I will never tell you that forgiving is easy, because it is risky. It requires being vulnerable, opening yourself up to that possibility of being hurt again, and that is scary. I always want, when I've been hurt by somebody, a kind of guarantee that I will never be hurt by them in that same way again. And eventually it just becomes sort of ludicrous to wait for that. And so I let go and trust. And new life comes, new relationship. And that potential for transformation is very powerful. So forgiveness does not mean forgetting, as some people fear, and it's not about minimizing the wrongs, dismissing the injustice that has been done, but it does require striving, stretching in uncomfortable ways. And maybe that's what Jesus was saying when he answered the question, not 7 times, but 77 times. He's suggesting that forgiveness is not a one-time act, but a process of restoration. Forgiveness invites us towards wholeness. It allows us to find new meanings inside older ones, to uncover what we may have overlooked. Forgiveness reorients us towards mercy. Can we acknowledge the wrongs of the past so we can move beyond them? I like what author Ayanna Mathis says, that instead of magically fixing a broken past, forgiveness is more a matter of living with a broken past. For some, for whom forgiveness can seem a bridge too far, perhaps something like acceptance can help begin that process of letting go. Maybe just to say, that happened. Maybe that's a healthy first step. Vengeance, retaliation, shunning, cutting off communication. Oh, they seem so satisfying. But they each have consequences. They keep us in a cycle of harm that traps the injured party, actually, in the past and poisons the present. There's no future without forgiveness was the rallying cry of the African National Congress as they began to dismantle apartheid in South Africa in the 1980s. Led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and President Nelson Mandela, the new leaders understood that forgiveness was essential if the country was to repair itself and be able to move forward. You all know they organized panels called Truth and Reconciliation Committees, and these committees were sent to all corners of the country, and the purpose was to listen to stories of suffering, stories of unimaginable hardship and persecution under the former regime, but also stories from those who had perpetrated those crimes against humanity. And for their public confession, they were given amnesty. The leaders of South Africa were not saying we must forget, in fact, quite the contrary. But they understood that forgiveness offers release. The wrongdoers are released from crippling guilt, and those who have been wronged are released from crippling bitterness and resentment. This past week, we marked the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. And it made me remember a PBS documentary called The Power of Forgiveness. Maybe some of you saw it. But in it, there are 3 women who each lost a loved one in the World Trade Tower collapse. 2 of them lost husbands and 1 a son. But together they found strength in their friendship and solace in their grief. And together they advocated for a garden of forgiveness that they wanted included in the memorial constructed at Ground Zero. And as you can imagine, it was very controversial, and it did not come to pass. People said, we cannot imagine forgiving those who drove planes into buildings on that day or the networks of terror that supported them. But one of the women said, yes, I was wronged. My husband is gone. But I need to embrace another idea. The woman whose son died in the attacks confesses in the documentary that at the time of her son's death, she and her son were estranged. She didn't go to his wedding, and he refused to speak with her for the last year that he was alive. She never tells us exactly what the issue was, and it becomes abundantly clear that it doesn't even matter. We watch her eyes fill with tears as she describes the futility of her unwillingness to forgive him for whatever it was. She would give anything to have him back so she could ask him for his forgiveness and tell him how much she loves him. She says it's too late to repair that relationship, but we can begin to repair the relationship with those we consider enemies. She wants to release herself from the prison of unforgiveness. When asked, how could he not be bitter after 27 years of imprisonment, Nelson Mandela said, resentment is like a glass of poison that a man drinks, and then he sits down and waits for his enemy to die. From Exodus, we hear the unforgettable story of Moses stretching out his hand over the sea and the Lord rolling back the water so that the people of Israel can pass through on dry land. And it is this miracle that allows the people of Israel to be saved. But it doesn't work out so well for the Egyptians, does it? They perish as Moses once again stretches his hand out over the water, and the Lord releases the roiling sea, and none of the Egyptian soldiers remain. So this has always been a hard story for me. But there's an old Hasidic tale that helps. According to a rabbi, the angels were rejoicing over the deliverance of Israel at the Red Sea, playing their harps, singing and dancing. "Wait," said one of them. "Look, the creator of the universe is sitting there weeping." They approached God and they asked, "Why are you weeping when Israel has been delivered by your power?" "I am weeping," said the maker of the universe, "for the dead Egyptians washed up on the shore, somebody's sons, somebody's husbands, somebody's fathers." When we forget that we are all in this together, enemies and friends, when we forget that, we do so at our peril. In Romans, Paul puts it right to us. Who are you to judge? We do not live to ourselves. We do not die to ourselves. We're the Lord's. All of us. We are the Lord's. It is in and through Christ that we belong to each other, disagreements and all, wrongs committed and all. It's through Christ that we will find our way towards loving one another as he loved us. It is with Christ's help that we can begin this process towards forgiveness. A friend shared with me that she took a workshop on forgiveness a long time ago, and the one thing that stuck with her was the suggestion that if you are having trouble praying for your enemy, just say their name. Hold up their name before God. And that's enough. Just say their name and ask for God's help. And that's a good place to start. In our scriptures today, we get these glimpses of our mutual interdependence, and we need them now more than ever. We're going into a year-long election season. God help us. The planet is in increasingly desperate shape. God help us. AI needs to be regulated. Congress and God help us. It's only through building consensus and speaking with people we disagree, opening ourselves up to new ways of thinking, trusting God, trusting ourselves, trusting each other, and practicing this process of forgiveness, that we have a hope of solving these really serious problems. In just a moment, we're going to pray together the words that Jesus taught us. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. When Jesus taught this prayer, he was not saying that God's forgiveness is conditional upon our forgiving others. Forgiveness that is conditional is not forgiveness. But he is offering us a way out of the prison of unforgiveness. We live in a graceless, unforgiving world. And as Christians, we are called to transform that world, to resist those human compulsions to demand an eye for an eye. Jesus does not promise us a life free of pain, but he shatters our paradigms of revenge, offers us another way, a different way to respond to pain, and one that guarantees new life and liberation. Did you hear? God placed an ad in the personal column of the Washington Post saying, "My children, my beloveds, come to me, all you who are weary. Come to me, all you who need redemption. Meet me at the altar at Holy Comforter today. All is forgiven. Papa."